Welcome to the Mind of Man podcast. Today we have Aaron Folk on the show, and we're just going to be spitballing, doing some hot topic reading, seeing what's in the media, what's going on in culture, anything that might give your head a shake. Little background on Aaron. We've been friends, I think, for 14 years. He served for the Canadian Armed Forces in the Army Reserve, in my Army Reserve unit. My kids have grown up around him. They call him DJ Folkman. He's been a mentor and a teammate to me, a good friend, and a good friend to have in my corner for real, figuratively and realistically. But, in a giant but, he and I have clashed on just about everything political that you can possibly think of. I love it, though. I love that we can challenge each other, call each other out, get really loud and pissed off, and turn around and carry on as friends with no animosity the very next day. I'm not sure how the rest of the world, doesn't have more of this. I guess people become passionate about stuff and they lose sight of, what's important and who their friends are. And, fortunately for us, we haven't never got there. All that to say, Aaron's going to be working on the show with me as the social media manager, probably some other stuff to do with some things that I have no idea about. And on occasion, he's going to co-host. And excited to take this on with him, and I'm really glad to have, remained friends with him over the years. And Aaron, I'm really glad to have you on the show. Dude, what is going on today?
Hey, thanks for having me on, man. Really appreciate it. And everything you said's pretty bang on. We've not only banged heads. We haven't literally fought each other, but definitely, had some really good debates and arguments. But I think all in like a healthy way. So yeah, really cool.
I'm very surprised we've never fought each other, actually, now that you mention it.
Yeah, it's funny. I've told other friends of mine about how I have literally like fist fought some of my former friends and even like some of my current friends, and they don't believe me. But I'm like, no, that's what like some guys do. Like we can fight each other physically, fisticuffs, and then like we're okay with it. Like it's cool.
I remember getting punched out by a very good friend, maybe not a very good friend, but a colleague and friend. And oh man, he just decked me and I was bleeding everywhere. And I was sitting there laughing because I thought it was a joke, but man, he was serious. He was mad. I love
Yeah,
that
it's
about, dudes and buddies.
yeah, it's a funny dynamic to have, and some people might not understand it. I think most men probably do understand it. A lot of women are just gonna like think we're these, immature like Neanderthals sometimes, but it's I don't know, it's just a different dynamic, I guess. It's like little brothers roughhousing or something. It's just kind of a natural order of things.
Yeah, I don't mind the Neanderthal or monkey or ape analogy. I don't care anymore. I just assume that's what I am and that's how society views me anyway. So I
Well,
act like one.
yeah, I mean that's where we came from, man. We are apes. We're part of the great ape family, and that's just you know scientifically what we are.
So rather than, the usual podcasts and, they usually have a little more structure, just wanted to pick your brain today on a few topics and, things that we've discussed over the years or even recently,
Hmm.
and see what we can draw out from you, from your perspective. And, one thing I know that is near and dear to both of us is competition.
Yeah. Oh
I'll
yeah.
never forget one of the first memories I have with you is, playing foosball and watching you whip a ball through, a picture of the Queen. Like it, we were extremely competitive, playing basketball, playing hockey. It didn't matter. We would fight and we would play hard. And, it was all about winning all the time. And so,
Yeah.
this first topic I want to get into is competition, but in particular, something you've been very, outspoken about, and that's the subject of women's sports, and
Right.
for a variety of reasons. So I wanted to start by, digging into how you see the current state of women's sports in North America. Let's just keep it to North America, and what are they doing, and how does our society or consumers perceive what they're doing, and how are they doing it? What are we currently seeing? What are the results of women's sports and what they're trying to achieve?
So as far as like the current state, I guess I'll start with the like first thing you mentioned. Um, I think the current state of professional women's sports is, I think it's in a fairly healthy place right now. I mean, maybe not from a social aspect, but from definitely like a financial aspect, it is growing, and it's becoming something that's more feasible, more tenable, more desirable, I guess, for pro athletes. I've really been into like or into disc golf for the last 3 years, and like professional women disc golfers are making good money, and it's not on the backs of anything but their hard work and the sponsorship and all the deals, I guess, or however you want to describe that, which is great. And then you take a look at some of the other, like the major sports, right? So you're going to take a look at the WNBA and professional women's soccer, I guess, are probably the two biggest ones. And I mean, they are growing and becoming more popular. I was just doing a little bit of reading before I came on here, and the NBA is or the WNBA is supposed to be like over $200 million in gross revenue this upcoming year, which I was actually surprised to see. Now they are still in the red, but they are supposed to become profitable by next year or the year after, which is actually a surprise to me. Um, Women's soccer, I'm not so familiar with, and I'm not. I think they're just starting to spool up the women's professional hockey league coming up here, so that's probably still in flux right now. But
Yeah, one thing I noticed with the women's basketball actually, and you mentioned it was the sponsorships coming out of I think college, right? Like the NCAA. I've noticed a lot more presence of women's athletes coming out of basketball, like that I see on TV and that I can follow, and that like actually I know their names. Like
oh
I
yeah,
couldn't tell you a name of a women's soccer player besides, and I can't even remember her last, Christine St. Clair, right?
right,
And that's it. That's the only one I know. Um, but with basketball, you have all these new like superstars. Caitlin Clark comes to mind.
yeah. Angel Reese,
Angel Reese,
yeah.
Aaliyah Edwards, she's from Canada, and I can't remember the other girl's first name, but Van Lith. All the girls
Oh
that
yeah,
were in the NCAA Women's March Madness that like I would say put on a show this year. I watched some of it. They were um, trash talky, I guess, and that was one
yeah,
of the things I wanted to ask about maybe a little bit later, but we can talk about it now. Is women's demeanor in sports, I think, has changed. I think they've adopted a lot of what what we would call the worst qualities in men by like trash talking or violence. Even we've seen women's hockey become a lot more violent,
yeah. It's
whether or
gone
not
the
they can
chip.
fight. But
Yeah, but yeah, for sure. Yeah, you do see a lot more of the what's the term, like the bravismo, I guess, or the sort of this or this like machismo. Maybe that's the word I was looking for. Yeah, like the machismo and just like being very um like overly in the face of people, and like trash talking, and like doing like the signals, like I don't see you, I don't see you,
yeah,
like doing stuff like that. So I mean, you know what, I think it really adds to the entertainment. I don't know if you want to say that's the worst part of some men's sports, but I guess you kind of have to find a balance with that, because it can get annoying, and like it looks like a lot of like like unfettered like arrogance.
I don't know if it's the worst part about men's sports, but some people would label them as the worst qualities of men
Yeah,
manifesting themselves in sports, violence in particular, trash talking, or whatever you
yeah,
have. It brings to mind like the hockey fight debate.
right, yeah, yeah. And that, like, that's a good point. I mean, what is it lending to the sport? Like, is if women start acting like the way men have acted, like with their poor behavior in some sport, like, is that good for the sport? I don't know. I mean, it definitely makes for entertainment. I mean, at the end of the day, what are pro athletes trying to do? They're trying to entertain. They're trying to get the sponsorship deals. They're trying to make money based on, personalities, right? So, obviously, like the Michael Jordans, the LeBron Jameses, the Kobe Bryants, and those superstar athletes. They're the ones that sort of had the big personalities, and they're the ones that made the most money. So,
Yeah, a combination of talent and attitude. Especially in the
yeah,
'80s in the NBA, right? In '80s and '90s, it was an attitude era, The Pistons Bulls rivalry, it was violent, and it was
Yeah,
very personality driven. Besides the talents on the floor, so
on in the 70s and 80s and like in the NHL. It
yeah,
was it was fucking Thunderdome out there, like
full on brawls, bench clearing brawls, people, you know, bleeding everywhere. I will never
oh,
forget, the
guys assaulting each
avalanche.
other. Yeah, guys assaulting each other with their sticks, and
Yeah,
it was absolute mayhem.
anarchy.
Yeah,
Maybe that's the trajectory for women's basketball.
God, I don't think that's gonna. I don't know. I don't think that's gonna draw in spectators. I mean, it might be entertaining to see a little bit more physicality. Let's say in women's hockey, women's basketball, but I don't think violence and getting like that is just not gonna. I don't know. I don't think that'd be a good thing, to be honest. I mean,
It brings to mind like the opposite end of that spectrum. So if you're not going to adopt, things like violence or entertainment in the form of like what we watch on men's sports in general, you have other sports or events that have kind of come to being in the last few years, and one of them is the Bananas, or whatever that baseball team is called.
oh yeah, I've seen a few videos of those guys.
It's a circus, right? It's a
Yeah,
show, and that's what they're doing with that, right? They're not putting butts in seats by being the most talented people out there. They're putting on a show. It's a literal circus.
yeah, it's like the Globetrotters, right?
Yeah.
The Harlem Globetrotters, yeah, of baseball, basically.
And I did notice, some women's sports kind of take on some of those traits in order to put butts in seats. And it definitely seemed that way. And you can first point to the Lingerie Football League.
Oh
That serves
yeah,
one purpose. It is
yeah,
incredibly violent. A lot of those women are incredibly talented, but they're in lingerie. The whole purpose is to put butts in seats.
yeah. And what did they rebranded themselves a few years back? I actually had a friend from Regina. I won't mention her name, but anybody who knows her knows that she had a big following with the what do they call themselves now? They're not called the Lingerie Football League. They're called something else now. But I'll have to look it up later. But anyways, yeah, she was part of that league. Like people, I followed her for a while, and I was like, what? She was in that league. Like holy cow! And like you see their outfits, and it's very sexualized and violence. Like, but that's what it's marketed as. Like that's what it is.
And they obviously were successful with that that
Yeah.
marketing strategy. Um, going into what you mentioned earlier about money and the WNBA, they're making more money, but they're putting up a loss. I don't expect them to break even anytime soon. But before the pod, we had talked a bit about women's soccer, and I was reading the other day the discrepancy in pay or subsidies to female soccer players on the world stage, and however the revenue sharing with the men plays out, it worked out to like 29 or 30% of revenue going towards subsidies for the women's soccer organizations.
Hmm.
Meanwhile, the men received 7%. Why that's significant? The men generated like $1.3 billion of that revenue, and the women generated somewhere in the range of 3 million.
Right.
And I'm just pulling off the top of my head, so those numbers might be off, but it was significant. And it was one of the questions I wanted to talk to you about. And it's should men's sports subsidize women's sports? It's not so much that we aren't. We're already doing it. But first off, should we? And if there is a should, is it yeah, we should because equality, or we should because it makes sense financially, or should we do it a little bit? Should it be a lot? Should we make it so that it's equal or not equal? Like, what do you think the right, solution is?
I think the easy answer is yes, but it's not for the reasons that some people would think. I think the answer is yes because it's a good investment for a long term growth in something that definitely has interest. I think the problem that some people have, and I'd say including myself, is when you start to get these rumblings and complaints about the pay. How much are we getting compensated? How much is the pay? And I don't like, what do they call that? It's sort of a logical fallacy to compare yourself to something that's not similar. Um, and so if you, as a female pro athlete, if you say, yeah, but LeBron James makes 30 million a year, how come he makes more than the entire WNBA? Well, that's an unfair question, and that subject can't even be broached because it's just ridiculous.
It lends itself to communism. They call it revenue sharing, but it's just
Yeah,
socialism at its core, communism at its core. It's taking revenue generated by A and giving it to B in the effort to create equality of outcome.
that's right. Yeah. Now, to be fair, I know that the argument was brought up, and I dug into this a little bit when I first heard about it. I watched a YouTube video about from one of the WNBA players claiming, well, the NBA's been revenue. Oh no, sorry, it wasn't WNBA player. Let me correct myself. It was an ESPN analyst, and she had said, well, the men's NBA has been revenue sharing for decades. In fact, and then they posted how several teams didn't make a profit a few years ago. And I sort of dug into this a little bit and I was like, oh, I didn't know that. Here's the problem with that argument. The NBA does revenue sharing, yes, to some teams that don't make money, but those teams don't always lose money. And the NBA makes multi billions of dollars. So it doesn't matter at the end of the day that they do a little tiny bit of revenue sharing just to make sure that those like lower, what are they called? Like basically those lower tier teams, those lower like spending teams still make money. But getting back to, I guess, your point, should we be, or sorry, not we, but I guess should professional men's organizations be revenue sharing or subsidizing women's professional sports? I think that's fine. I think that's totally cool, but I just don't want to hear anybody complaining that they should be making more money if they're not actually generating any net revenue, which is different than gross revenue. I hope people sort of understand the differences there.
So if you're in control of a women's sports league, a professional one at the highest levels, what are you doing to change the minds of people like you and I who think that it should be revenue based, more or less? And to change the minds means you got to generate more revenue. What are you going to do to generate revenue and change my mind?
Well, it's I think it just comes down to what any organization's done for decades and for over a century. In the case of Major League Baseball and the PGA, is you've got to get the talent, you've got to get the interest of fans, you got to market yourself, and with the fans comes the money and comes the advertising dollars and comes more fans, and it's a slow growth cycle. I think a lot of people don't realize that the NHL, the NBA, the National Football League, the PGA, it took all those organizations 70 to 120 years to grow. And it's going to be a slow process. I mean, obviously, we have to, the women have to start somewhere. So, like I said, the short answer is yes. I think there should be some subsidies there, but I just don't like hearing sort of this social babble going on, arguing about, oh, well, the women need to be making more money because of this, and it's like, no, 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 no. The women will make more money eventually, but it's going to be a slow process. You just got to be more patient. You can't be demanding that men be paying more money, and then accusing the fans of being sexist, or accusing, the advertisers of being elitist and sexist. It's not a healthy look.
it it's true. Like it has to be slow, and I'm positive that the woke culture forgets that sometimes. They want it, and they want it now. They want the equality to happen overnight, and we saw it with just general women's rights over the last 100 years, um, but also women in the workplace, right? We have employment equity initiatives across Canada. It's like written in stone in the federal government.
Yeah.
We still don't see it manifest itself, right? We can't force it to happen. We can put all the tools in place so that it is able to happen, but it has to take time. But if somebody spits a statistic at me and goes, yeah, you see, there's not enough women in these types of roles and they're not making as much money as men. I'm like, okay, yeah, but it's 2023 and we started this process like maybe 30 years ago, like actually taking it seriously and having
Yeah.
women in power roles in the workplace, or management type roles that were traditionally dominated by men. And it's no different for sports. Like
Oh yeah, absolutely.
most people don't watch women's sports. I bet you there wasn't even women's sports even on TV, 20 years before I was born. Nobody probably ever even watched it.
Yeah, like the
Now
only
you
thing I
have national stages for it.
Yeah, the only thing I can remember, I can recall watching when I was a youngster. So we're talking like in the '80s, which is, we're talking already like 35 plus years ago, 37
You're
years ago.
40. Stop that.
Well, I was watching sports when I was like 5, 6, 7 years old. So,
Yeah, yeah, okay.
so yeah, we're talking in the '80s. I remember watching women's tennis. I remember watching like anytime there was any female like sport, like the Olympics were on or anything like that, like I would watch all sports. Like if it had entertainment value, and there was good, like there was a competitive aspect to it and there was entertaining, I watched it. I remember seeing it. I remember watching like Steffi Graf in the '80s and '90s, and Martina Navratilova in tennis, and I don't remember any female like golf pros, but I do remember like watching uh, Florence, like Flojo, like she's a track and field athlete. I remember watching her in the Olympics. So yeah, you're right. Like the stage wasn't quite there 40 years ago, 30 years ago. Like they probably just weren't even like, I assume they weren't even broadcasting it for the most part, but
Yeah.
now they are, and it's gonna be a slow process for sure.
Did you watch the Williams sisters in tennis? That's the one that comes to mind. I grew up watching. For some reason we watched tennis. Like
Yeah, they
Andre
were.
Agassi and Serena Williams and Venus Williams and Andy Roddick and
Yeah, like the Williams sisters popped up around the 2000s. So that's like 20 whatever years ago now. We're talking 23 years ago. Maybe even, yeah, it must have been right around then. Like kind of the 2000s was when like the or sorry, well, they were the Wimbledon sisters, for crying out loud. Like they literally met each other to play in the finals at Wimbledon, which is crazy. And absolutely, I watched that. Yeah.
well, and she is it Venus or Serena? Now I can't remember. I believe it's Serena. That's in the
Uh,
GOAT conversation for her particular
yeah.
sport.
Yeah, it's Serena. Yeah, she's
I
definitely
hope
the
I'm
greatest
right.
female.
And
It's Serena. She's the greatest female tennis player of all time.
yeah, and that's something of significance, to even be considered in those conversations. Like, well, who's the goat of the sport? Who's the goat of of tennis? Who's the goat of women's tennis or women's golf or whatever?
Yeah,
When you see those top 10 lists of the goats for athletes, you got Gretzky, Michael Jordan, you know, uh, what is it? His name Pele for
yeah. Pele
soccer.
for soccer. Yeah,
And
Tiger Woods
Serena's up
obviously in
there.
golf. Yep,
Yeah,
Serena.
and Tiger, right? And it's male dominated, and that's a time thing. And I think you'll start to see women pop up on those lists more, especially, and you mentioned it, and we're going to talk about it when we start talking about Olympics. And before we get to that, the other most prominent female I can think of that I think is getting close to that GOAT status, and that's Christine St. Clair. But and possibly some of the hockey players, from Canada and the United States as well.
Yeah,
It's just
like a
not
Haley
as a
Wickenheiser types, and
yeah. The problem with hockey and women's hockey in particular is it's Canada and the U.S. It's very rarely any other country because nobody cares.
yeah,
Um,
and unfortunately, yeah, there hasn't been enough competition in some of those traditional sports that you're right. Like soccer being the biggest one. Well, okay, so I'd say soccer and hockey being the two biggest team sports, and maybe a little bit basketball. But yeah, the U.S. has dominated women's soccer forever, and Canada and the U.S. have dominated women's hockey forever. But everybody's catching up like a little bit at a time now.
and yeah, we've seen that in men's sports, luckily as well. And I say luckily, for the sake of the sport, it kind of sucks in Canada when the rest of the countries are all catching up to you and really good at hockey now.
Yeah,
Like we sit back and we watch our World Juniors get smoked all the time, and then every once in a while we get a Connor Bedard who saves the day, and you know
yeah,
the rest of the world has caught up to those major sports, and I think we'll see, and I think you hit the nail on the head. More competition is going to drive athletes to different levels and different heights. You're going to see more Serena and Venus Williams of the world. You're going to see more Christine Sinclairs. The golfer right now. See, I don't know the names.
oh
I
yeah,
know that there is a particular golfer in women's golf that is shredding everybody else because I click onto it TSN. I'm like, she's real good, and I click off of it.
yeah.
I'm a very poor supporter of women's sports, I guess.
We're not supporting women's sport, but I challenge you to go and find 100 female sports fans out there. It's not very easy to find, man. Like I've rarely known women who support their own gender in a sport, and that's one of the biggest criticisms. I'm talking about the WNBA earlier, is that there are not enough women supporting the WNBA. In fact, they've been challenged on it on ESPN and numerous other channels where they had these analysts and reporters and said, "Who are your five? Go ahead and name five WNBA players right now." And they couldn't name a single one. It's like, well, okay, name five NBA players. That's easy to do. What's the reason behind that? Is it sexist marketing? That's a bit of a stretch. Is it sexist, advertising and media coverage? It's a bit of a stretch again. Is it just the lack of ability and the lack of interest? That's probably what it is.
Yeah, I'm surprised we missed that earlier because I had thought about that too. And you look at the stands even at a WNBA game, and it's a bunch of dudes. The followers that are there, the fans that are there, are still men.
Yeah.
I mean, the women in the crowd are likely exponentially increased from that of a men's game, but they're still dominated by men as fans.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't know, it's an interesting subject, even like from a psychological standpoint, which is, I know a topic that you just love. Like I know you're so interested in all aspects of like social psychology and just basic human psychology. It's like, is it that we're trying to push too hard to like uh force women to try to support something that maybe they just aren't like overly interested in? And that's not a sexist thing to say. Like men and women definitely have different interests. Like that's a proven fact that's been flushed out. Men are interested in things, and then women are interested in. And I can't remember what the term is, but we really are interested in different things, and that's perfectly cool. Like that's fine. I think men are always going to be more interested in watching competition and sports more than women are, and that's
Competition is in and of itself, based in blood sport. So there's that to be said. And there's biological differences in what we're even interested in. So I totally agree
yeah,
with that. Like,
yeah,
I can't like you were saying, I don't even know if I could name 10 women I know that watch sports, maybe besides the writers. Like that's it.
Yeah,
Like we live, 40 minutes away and they're just the only sports team in town and it's something to do with the kids.
for
They
sure. And
don't care.
it's
They've never turned on a hockey game, a football game, none of it. They might if
no,
I do, and they might even enjoy it once in a while. But
sure.
I and other men, we can sit down day after day after day,
Oh,
week after week, debating and yelling and screaming and becoming extremely invested
yeah, look what
in
happens
sport.
during look what happens during like NFL fantasy season. I mean, you'd see you'd see a plethora of men absolutely obsessed and spending or arguably wasting their time on fantasy football like me and you
Yeah.
for basically how many weeks in the season?
17 weeks for 20
Yeah,
bucks. Let's
yeah,
do
so 17 weeks plus maybe a little week on the end. Like, holy cow.
Yeah.
And I've only ever met, I think, I mean, and again, this isn't like a criticism of women. So any girls that happen to watch this or any like girlfriends of mine that I've ever talked to, know this. It's like, I'm not bashing women that they're not interested in this stuff. It's like, that's perfectly fine. But like, that's what men do. Like, we just love wasting our time, like talking about sports and doing fantasy leagues and arguing and debating about who's the
Yeah.
greatest of all time. And
Like we were talking about earlier, we're apes. We're talking about ape stuff. The
yeah,
apes are fighting in the hockey rink. Let's talk about the apes in the hockey rink. The apes are fighting, over in the NFL. Let's talk about the apes. We're all just monkeys fighting over a banana,
yeah,
and people watch it and talk about it and gamble on it now. So, may and that brings up an interesting point actually. Gambling in sports, and how crazy that's been over the last couple of years as it's completely taken over men's sports. But
oh,
you can also gamble on WNBA games. So I don't know how many other women's sports it extends to, but you can gamble on it, and I think that's part of that revenue sharing, right? That has to be.
I'm not familiar with how sports betting shares their revenue or how any of that works. Like, I'm honestly like, I've got zero clue how that works. I assume that there's a lot of revenue sharing going on because that's why the NHL, the NBA, the NFL, they love to push and push and push betting companies and betting ads and betting websites. Like, there's clearly a ton of, at the very minimum, advertising dollars that are getting pumped into these organizations. So I'm assuming women's soccer, the WNBA, all international hockey is covered by all major like betting sites. So yeah, man, it's a big business and it's kind of annoying sometimes. I mean, I used to bet a lot. I don't really bet much anymore except for a little bit of fantasy and whatnot. But yeah, it's like saturated baseball, football, everything.
It changes everything. It changes how money is made. The money's not really being made with fans in the seats and with memorabilia and jersey sales. I mean, it is like they generate a ton. And I think of the NFL, they generate probably $1 billion in jersey sales every year. Tom
Yeah,
Brady's probably still one of the number one jersey sales, and he's retired. But now this other revenue avenue, yeah,
yeah,
comes open,
that's
right?
awesome.
And they
Yep,
start to utilize it, and they're like, "Whoa, look at all the money we can make from MGM if we
yeah,
do this little revenue sharing." And they got an app. Let's push the app. Let's push it to the nth
yeah.
degree. And yeah, like you said, it's on every single break. There's like 4 different apps I can download and that are being pushed to me. So it'll be interesting to see, over the next couple of years how much not just revenue is generated, but how much is given to women's sports, and if we can, see that type of revenue sharing from the gambling community back into the sports.
Yeah. Again, I'm just so unfamiliar with that, and I should actually I should look into it and see exactly what dollars are flowing where because I'm kind of interested now because organizations like sports organizations are always motivated by where their money's coming from. It used to be traditionally the fans in the seats, like you said, and then it was a little bit of merchandise. Then TV came along, now you've got advertising revenue dollars on television. And then there came obviously the internet. Then you got streaming services. Now you've got gambling. And now it's like Do they just not care about the fans anymore, and they're only worried about like the gamblers who are betting? And I don't
And you know
know.
what? I think that is the case. And it, to me, has manifested itself in the CFL. Now, the CFL has different motivations, I think, other than the gambling aspect, because they're probably not being given much of that revenue share. The CFL was on the verge of bankruptcy during COVID. I'm surprised they didn't just completely fold the entire league. But now, when you go to a game, and we've talked about this, the product that is on the table is not a football game anymore. It's a show. It's a advertising show. Every 5 seconds, I'm getting pushed an ad, but it's
Yeah.
just coming from a field instead of a TV. And different promos. We're promoting this, we're promoting that. Oh, it's this special week. Hey, buy your stupid shirt, buy your bag, buy this. And it's the football game is secondary at this point. Not that
Oh
the
yeah.
writers are any good, but
Yeah, no, you're right, man. It's it's I've noticed it. I've noticed the big shift in the distractions in pro sports, and the CFL is probably one of the worst because they they never were an elite sport. They never were something that had super high entertainment value, but they have now adopted the same sort of strategy that major sports teams have done, in that they're trying to just like distract the fans with a bunch of like silly nonsense and advertising and promos and hot dog this and t-shirt that and bobblehead this. It's like, CFL, you guys need to sell your main product, which is your game, first. You're joking if you think that fans are just going to come out and spend $15 on a beer and like $40 on a t-shirt just because you tell us to, because your product sucks right now.
so can we not say the same thing about women's sports? And you know, nobody's going because the product isn't there. What?
It's
Really?
I mean to get real, and if we go back to the major sports team, the WNBA, the ones that are in the news the most, you're right. Everybody is well, sorry, let me rephrase. The cynics and the critics are very, very strongly opinionating, or sorry, opining. I think that's the word. They're very strongly opining that, look at the reason why they're not getting butts in the seats, the advertising dollars, the ticket sales, et cetera, is because the product is weak right now. And I have watched several highlight packages over the past couple of years. I probably watch a full highlight package every week because I watch a lot of sports. I don't care if it's men's or women's. I love all sports. But yeah, it's weak. It's very weak, and you're not going to convince me to buy WNBA gear or like go to a game. Like, I'm just like not interested right now because it's just the product's not quite there. It's not because I hate women. It's because it's just the overall product's not great.
Yeah, you can't shame me for not buying your stuff, right?
Yeah,
And what has to come first? And in my mind, the product has to come first before you get to that
100%.
point.
Hundred
And
percent.
no amount of revenue sharing or shaming of
Yeah,
people, like nothing
shaming,
is going to change
promos,
that.
yeah, all that. It's just not gonna, until it becomes more exciting, and until, and as a lot of NBA players have said, this isn't my opinion, until the women start dunking the basketball and high flying to the hoop, it's gonna be it's gonna be a while before you see the billions of dollars rolling in and people really, really excited to go watch the sport.
I think we're close to that in the WNBA.
Sure.
I've seen the product at least increase over the last few years, and I watch NCAA more than I watch WNBA. Like, it's just better basketball in general because they're there for something. They're competitive.
Oh, absolutely.
Um, you can see it coming. I think there's a
Oh,
few women that
100%.
are some serious athletes that yeah, I think we're gonna see like a dunk competition in the next 3 to 5 years.
I watched today, no less. I watched a 5 foot. They said she was 5'6", but who knows, right? Like, it could be, they could be doctoring the numbers or whatever. But I watched a young girl today. Apparently, she's in high school. Apparently, she's 5'6". Now, maybe she's 5'9". Who cares? She just about dunked a basketball, and she's like a high school girl, and she's not tall. And I was like, holy smokes! Like, yeah, like that's what you need. Like, you need these like super high flying, like competitive, young female athletes that are going to get in there and like totally change the game, right?
Brings to mind Jackie Moon, right? And the alley oop from Semi Pro. Everybody's just like, yeah, we're not
Yeah.
going to see the tropics. The tropics are garbage. Oh, this guy does an alley oop. Foul. Immediately calls a foul on him because they don't know what to do about it.
Yeah.
And then all of a
Yeah.
sudden everybody's like, this is the coolest thing ever. Like, this is new and it's exciting and I want to watch it.
Well, yeah,
That's what I think you hope for with any sport, whether it's women's or men's. I need something to blow my mind. I need something to be exciting that's going to make me jump out of my seat. And
yeah,
maybe it's not
and
there
it
yet.
and it yeah, it just isn't there yet. And I think it's man, it's so multifaceted. It's lazy. It's easy and lazy to just criticize and slough it off to sexism and like the old boys club. It's like that's just not what it is. There's so many other layers involved. There aren't enough women in basketball, even though there's a lot. There's not enough, and if you don't have more athletes in a sport, you're not going to get the creme de la creme rising to the top.
Um, it where I think it is already, a product that is successful, but doesn't necessarily generate the revenue that they're particularly looking for. And that we talked about earlier, and that's the Olympics, right? The moment women's hockey leaves its league that no one watches and goes to the Olympics, you know, the entire northern hemisphere, or correction, the entire North American continent is all of a sudden watching, right?
Yeah,
Because now they care. So there's something to be said about the type of competition and the leagues that are involved. The Olympics being, what it is, which is international competition, the best in the world, gives it that bump, right? And I love watching the Olympics. It doesn't even matter which sport. I will turn it on and I will watch it.
yeah, I'm the same way.
Um, women's gymnastics is probably one of the craziest sports on the planet, and men don't compare in my mind. Men can do most, if not even more in some cases, but it doesn't seem like they can because their bodies, the way they contort and jump around and spin around. Whereas a tiny little woman, what's her name, Simone,
Yeah, Simone Biles.
yeah, does some crazy thing and you're like blown out of your seat, right? And that's putting bodies in the seats. More people watch the women's gymnastics than they do the men's gymnastics.
Yeah, the men do different, much different events in their gymnastic routines. They're more sort of strength based. But yeah, as far as the agility is concerned, yeah, the women blow the men out of the water every time because they just can't compare. Like, no, it doesn't matter how strong or big you are as a guy or fit, you will never ever be able to compare to a Simone Biles. What she can do, it's impossible.
Um, yeah, so I mean, the product for women's sports, I think, can be there. And it can be there in every sport, and it could be on an equal playing field as men for the most part. I did want to talk a bit about, my stance just on women's sports as, in general, because I struggle with how to teach my daughter some of this stuff. And she's always saying things like, well, I could do that. And I could be, in the NBA, or can I play football, or can I do this? And you try to come up with what the right answer is for her psyche without letting her down and going, you're never playing in the NFL. you, you are
Yeah,
you being you are never going to dunk the ball. If you can somehow dunk the ball, you have a vertical like 10 times your size. Like things like that, where you don't want to tell them they can't do something because they're a woman. You know, you want to tell them the right thing. And I also don't want to tell her something that will give her false hope, right? I don't want to say, yeah, you can totally, go play whatever, women's soccer or women's hockey, and you could
Hmm.
totally make it to the bigs. Well, what's the bigs, and what does that even do for you in major women's sports right now? Not much.
Yeah. Well, it's tough. It's tough to know where the landscape will be. So, I don't know. I don't have this fictional idea in their children's heads that they can do anything that they want. They can be a billionaire. They can be the president. They can, become the MVP of the NBA. It's like I think that that is unhealthy personally. Like I don't think that that's like to tell your daughter that she can't be the NBA of the or MVP of the NBA and dunk a basketball. I don't think there's anything wrong with telling her that. I think telling her like, "Oh, well that's the men's league and those boys can jump really high, but you know what? I would love to see you try to dunk a basketball someday. That'd be awesome." Like I think that's okay,
Yeah, I'm gonna use that. Look at you giving me parenting tips.
but
Meanwhile, I got a son now, and I'm somehow gonna have to explain to my daughter that he's gonna be so much bigger than you, and
well, yeah.
he is,
You're gonna
and
have to
he's gonna get to do these things, and you aren't.
you're gonna have to you're gonna someday you're gonna have to have that talk with your son that like, look at if you don't become a professional athlete, like you're disowned, you're out of the
Yeah, get out.
house.
You're built like a linebacker. Why are you not a linebacker?
Yeah. You're
Uh,
either in sports or you're not my son.
my daughter's more likely to kick his ass though. Like she's doing this whole taekwondo thing, and I think that's one of those sports. It's Olympic sport that, um, at least here, there's tons of girls doing this thing, and it's an awesome sport to introduce young girls to. I think because it gets away from dance and it gets away from uh, I'll just call them pansy sports because I don't know what else to call them. Like,
Like artistic
yeah,
sports.
they're
Yeah, I know what
pansy
you're
sports.
saying.
I understand that dancers are incredible athletes.
Oh, of course.
It's just music playing and people wiggling around. It's it's pointless. And she loves dance, and I'm sitting there like, well, man, I hope she likes a real sport, and she does. So thank God.
Well,
Taekwondo, it's violent.
she
It's
she can get into MMA if she wants.
Yeah, well, we're on a waiting list for jujitsu. I think she might kill someone. She's kind of nuts. But I encourage those types of behaviors in her. It's funny. This is kind of off topic of the sport, but um, people are always telling me, they're like, oh, you got to tell her to be a little bit more nice. This is mainly coming from family members, right? Oh, she's being kind of mean. I'm like, well, why is she being mean? Oh, she wouldn't let the other kid do this. I don't care. Like, is the other kid weaker than her? Like, we're in this weird dichotomy where we're wanting women to be stronger and adopt all these traits of men and like be strong and go to the workforce and do all these things and play sports and make money in sports. But we still want them to like roll over when, people are taking advantage of them or mistreating them, or, if somebody takes a toy away from her, you should share. No, go get it back. Like, kick his
Yeah,
ass. Like, I just don't care. Like, people look at me like I'm nuts. And I'm like, but, I want this for her. I want her to be tough. Why are you telling me to make her not tough? Are you a sexist? Do you want her to be, not in a position of power when she's older?
uh,
I like the hashtag. I use it kind of frequently now, is the hashtag she is fierce. And I don't know where the hell it came from. It probably wasn't meant for somebody like me to just use and abuse, but I use it all the time. I use it for sports and women in politics. And whenever you find a woman that's, kicking ass in whatever field that she's in, that's the time for that hashtag. And so I've used it with some of the videos I've posted of my daughter doing sports and being tough and like
oh
whatever it is she
yeah,
likes to do. Right.
yeah,
And so, trying to instill that in her, and getting back to the sports thing, if she's going to do these sports and she wants to be the best and she wants to do this, and, it's all this want stuff. Well, there's a bit of a cost to that. You have to be tougher. And especially when you're competing against boys,
yeah.
Taekwondo, she competes against boys. So buckle up. Like, be the tough girl. That's fine. Be stronger, work out. And she does. She been bugging me. I told you I was working out the other day. I got home and she made me work out again. I don't know. She keeps telling me my fat belly got to go. I'm like, okay, you're 6. Relax. Daddy's tired. Well, I don't want to go too much longer. I don't really have a closeout for this, but you know, one of the things we might have already talked about it a little bit, but if you were to pick a sport that you could see becoming a success, and I use the term success very broadly. Let's say 10 years, what would be the most successful women's sport and why?
I think it's going to be it's easily the WNBA. Like it's not even a question. It's because they've already got 27 years of established um, failures and achievements, and they've got the money pouring in, and they've got the most visibility and like the best talent right now. Um, Women's hockey, actually, I'm gonna say professional women's soccer is probably gonna be second, and then women's pro hockey will be a third, a distant third, because they haven't gotten their act together. Like they're only just starting up a pro league now. That's going to be a long time before you see major interest from sponsors, any type of revenue from like fan base. So yeah, it's going to be the WNBA. It's going to be the biggest female sport in the world, and you're going to see multi-million-dollar female athletes with massive sponsorship deals, and you're going to see girls dunking basketballs. Like it's just going to be on a regular basis. Absolutely.
Right on. Well, man, I appreciate you taking the time tonight. I've really enjoyed this, and we're definitely doing this again. This
Oh
is
yeah, I feel
this
like we've
kind
been
of beats, the whole structure of a podcast. I like the structured ones, but just riffing and just talking about stuff. I love that. It's what
oh
we do.
geez, yeah, yeah. We could. I mean, I feel like we barely scratched the surface. Like holy cow! If I
You and I could go at it for some other way more controversial topics. Our
oh
viewers will have to wait for some fireworks on politics for another day. Is there anything you wanted to promote or whatever you call it?
uh, I don't know. Just whenever you get a chance, definitely check out disc golf on like YouTube. Watch the highlights and like watch what the girls can do, man. Like holy smokes! I mean, the guys are obviously throwing further than them, but like, damn, like you watch the women compete against other women. It's like it's all the same basket size, it's all the same discs they're using. It's like it's just unbelievable what's like some of the athletes out there right now. They're crazy good.
There you go. Unapologetic disc golf promo.
Yeah.
All right, man. It's been swell. We'll talk to you later.
All right. Thanks for having me on, buddy.
Yeah, have a good one.
Talk to you soon. Bye.